Welcome to episode 127 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. Congratulations on hanging in there another week. This is no small feat. The news around the world seems to be more disturbing with each passing day. The brave souls of Ukraine continue their defensive battle. Evil is playing out in the world and right here at home. We are at some sort of breaking point in terms of democracy in this country. Some of the most cruel legislation is being passed right here in this country. Sides must be chosen. Alignments must be made. Either you are on the side of evil, or you choose to envision a world that is more loving and just. Evil never dissipates on its own. It must be rejected and extinguished. The people here and elsewhere need to decide the world we want to live in. These are the times that we are living in. It would be more than enough to just live our normal lives. Life is challenging. We have so many areas of focus that need our attention at all times. And this is without factoring in the evil deeds of those at the lowest levels of spiritual awareness. Everyday life is more than enough to send many of us to the edge. But we came here to be part of the rebirth. We came here to stand up for what is right. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we felt that we were up to the challenge. That is something we need to remind ourselves of day after day, sometimes hour after hour. You know who did stand up to the challenge? Our ancestors. Had they not, we wouldn't even have the chance to be here for this battle at this time. The ancestors have already fought all the battles that we are fighting today. Maybe they didn't have to face so many of them at the exact same time, but their lives didn't include the ease that many of us enjoy now either. Just getting through a day of basic survival was much tougher for them. But they went through it all. The pandemics, the wars, the famines, the plagues. They went through all the hatred and division. They grappled with all the tough social issues. They saw it all. Did they always respond in the best ways? No. Look around. We aren't either. When you look back in history and wonder how people did the things they did, it no longer takes any imagination, because we can see it right before our very eyes. The souls who were working at the lowest levels back in history are back here again, not doing much better. They struggle, and they make life more difficult than it needs to be for everyone else. But we keep slogging through. We keep trying to do our best. History will keep repeating itself because every era is populated by souls who struggle, some to do the right thing, and others to do whatever they think they can get away with. They will do whatever it takes to get whatever it is that they think they need. Just look at Putin. He controls a population of over 144 million people. He controls the wealth of that country. He has all the power. He controls all the land in a country that has the largest land mass in the world. Yet that is not enough for him, which is really hard to fathom. He needed to gain the control of the 44 million people in Ukraine. He needed that much more power. He needed that much more wealth. He needed that much more land. Ukraine is slightly smaller than the state of Texas in land size. When you are motivated by greed, there is never enough. There is never a point where you are satisfied. And the evil he is unleashing on another country will never even make him wince. Any means to an end. This is human behavior at its predictable worst. In our time of confronting evil, it must be noted who is currently siding with Putin. They are on the side of evil, and we cannot ignore that. They are on the side of the darkness, and they are capable of everything that Putin is capable of. Why? Because just like Putin, they think they have the right to do so. The ancestors are not shocked by any of this. They have had to look evil in the eye, and many of them gave their lives to stop it. My father fought in World War II and faced the evil of Hitler. My dad built bridges for soldiers to cross while he was being shot at by the enemy. My father faced evil and came home victorious. Our ancestors have faced it all. Had they not, you and I would not even be here. There is much talk these days about some of the things that our ancestors did, and the discussion about whether or not we can even discuss their actions or tell our children about them. But let's bring it back to our time here in this school for a moment. If you have spent any time here on this planet, you have amassed some regrets of your own. There is no way you have made every right decision since you've been here. Some may be the simple kind of regrets, wishing you hadn't done or said things that no longer align with who you currently are. Some are much larger and had bigger impacts on others. Some are soul-crushing. They are all part of the price of being alive. We are all here being human and flawed and growing day after day. We had to make some choices that weren't the best. Many of those choices resulted in us having the wisdom now to see that they weren't great choices and that they are choices we would never make again. But here's the thing. You can't look back at your previous choices through the lens of your current eyes. It's just not fair. You will judge yourself too harshly. What you have learned in the interim makes those choices seem wrong or crazy or both. You can't imagine, with your current level of awareness, that you would ever be able to make such choices. But what was not clear to you then is clear to you now. That is growth. That is what we are here for. We are here to learn and grow. And over the course of your growth, you will see things quite differently, and you will choose quite differently. What you think you want or need to do at one point in your life no longer applies further down the line. It helps to understand that everyone, including you, does the best that they can in any given moment. Everyone is working with whatever level of knowledge and awareness they possess at any given moment. If you are working at a spiritual awareness level of a second grader and you made a choice that would reflect a sixth grade level of awareness, that was just dumb luck. It wasn't because you possessed all the wisdom to know why that choice was the right one. And sometimes the only reason you didn't make a wrong choice is because you didn't have the opportunity. Let's take a look at one of the many horrific things in our country's past: slavery. Slavery is an unthinkably cruel act that has happened since the beginning of time all over the planet. It continues to this day in one form or another. In the South, people convinced themselves that to take in people who had been ripped from their homes and make them do all the labor that the white people didn't want to do was a perfectly fine idea. They thought that systematically abusing them, raping them, and tearing their families apart was all perfectly fine. They did not see a problem with selling, trading, and passing down the possession of people as an immoral act. They convinced themselves that the people they used and abused weren't really people at all. My ancestors were Northerners. They were people of Nordic extraction who did the back-breaking labor of establishing places like Minnesota and North Dakota. They did not have slaves. That wasn't the way their culture was set up. But were they progressive, multicultural people? No. They had all their own prejudices and set up their towns to be as non-challenging as possible. And they descended from Vikings, who had a history of being wild and violent. No one in the past was what people complain of as being woke today. The systems that kept things all together were not fair or just. They reflected only the wishes and needs of white landowning men. Everyone adhered to strict rules of who and how they could be. It's not fair to look back at them and apply today's standards. There is no way they could live up to the awareness that we now possess. And here's the kicker. We will not be able to live up to the standards of the next generation or any generation after that. There are things that we do now that will be seen as unthinkable by the generations that will follow us. And we don't even know that what we are doing is wrong. Some of our wrongs are active and some are passive, but they will surely be seen as wrong. How could they? What were they thinking? Our ancestors made mistakes, both big and small, every day that they were here. We are making mistakes, both big and small, every day that we are here. It is the design. It is what growth looks like over the course of many generations. The fact that we can now see that they were mistakes is the good news. It means that we are growing. Mistakes and growth go hand in hand, but only if handled properly. One thing we know about mistakes is that it's hard to grow without acknowledging that you made them. It is also hard to grow when you are stuck in the regrets about those mistakes and unwilling to move forward. It is impossible to grow when you're stuck in the place of trying to cover up or excuse those mistakes. At the point that you make a mistake, you do not yet have the wisdom to see that or have the integrity to admit it. An example of this can be found in the recent interviews with Bill Barr. He has all sorts of things to say about how wrong and out of touch with reality his former boss was, but says he will vote for him again if given that chance. He also did not take any accountability for the wrongdoing on his part during their reign of terror. He has not grown an inch. He still has no accountability and no integrity. He feels entitled somehow to turn that into a book that will enrich him. That is not growth. He has not gained any wisdom from the mistakes he made, and he may not gain any in this lifetime. Looking in from the outside, we always want those who have transgressed to own up to what they have done. We want them to admit their mistakes and ask for forgiveness. We want them to admit that they knew what they were doing was wrong and they wish they hadn't done it. We want them to know better so they can do better. But it rarely works out that way, at least not in the short run. It takes people a while to truly take in their actions and the scope of the repercussions, and they can only do that if they choose to do that. We can't mandate growth for people or even expect it. So what do we do for all the people who are no longer here? How do we look at the choices people made in the past? How do we reconcile the duality that exists in all people? How do we reconcile the grandmother who loved her family fiercely and baked wonderful cookies, while equally fiercely screaming at black children who were being integrated into formerly all-white schools? How do we reconcile the sweet grandpa who loved his people more than life itself with the man who was capable of lynching people? It's all seemingly too awful to consider, but it is the history of this and every other country. People did awful things that they thought they had the right to do. People did awful things that changed the course of history. People did awful things that subjugated entire classes and races of people. People have been violent and vicious and cruel. And those same people were deeply loved by their own people. It's all too painful to consider, but we must. Some of these events are so painful that people are enacting laws that say we can't talk about them, which basically keeps us all stuck. People do not want future generations to know what happened in the past. But ignoring the past makes it impossible to understand why we find ourselves as a culture in the condition we currently are in. It also invites the new generations to repeat the mistakes of the past. If we can't be honest about our past, we can't acknowledge the damage that was done. We can't make amends. We can't ensure these things don't happen again. And we are cursed with an inability to grow. But we are all here to grow, both as individuals and as the collective culture. We all need to cultivate the ability to look at both the good and bad choices that we have all made, both as individuals and the ancestors. We have all been exceedingly human, and history reflects that. If you go back far enough, all family lines contain victims and perpetrators. All family lines have reasons to feel pride and reasons to wince. Our task moving forward is to find it within ourselves to identify and process the trauma that has occurred, both at an individual level and a cultural level. We need to accept the fullness of the human experience, with all its messy contradictions and human frailty. And at the end of that, we need to find love and compassion for ourselves and others, both living and dead. Thanks for returning for another week of Rebirth Revolution. Keep your chin up and your eyes on those who are truly shining in this moment. One of my favorite heroes in this moment, and many that preceded it, is Jose Andres, who founded the World Central Kitchen. He just keeps showing up with food for people who need it. He is there for the natural disasters, and he is there feeding the Ukrainians. He and his crew use their gifts to help those who are facing the very worst times in their lives. Watching them renews my faith in humanity. You can always let me know how you're doing by emailing me at rebirthrev@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Rebirth Revolution can be found on all the podcast apps, the music apps, and full episodes play on YouTube and our Facebook page. Please subscribe, download, and share whenever possible. Until next week, forgive yourself, forgive others, take the appropriate COVID precautions, and thank and forgive the ancestors. They don't want you to repeat toxic patterns. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and open to all understanding.